Welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be a story time video. I am going to be discussing my first miscarriage in this video. So I really want to let you know ahead of time, I do plan on being very detailed with my story because I am sharing it to kind of help other people just kind of cope with what they've experienced during miscarriage. There are people out there that have experienced worse than I have, and there are people out there that have not experienced worse than I have, but nonetheless, it all hurts, and I think it is a subject that is not talked about enough because I feel like people think it's a little taboo to talk about it, but that is what this video is going to be about. So if you are not interested in that, please click out of the video now. If you are, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up if you think this is a subject that should be talked about more. If not, go ahead and dislike the video or click out of it. But let's get started. Oh my god, I feel like I have to take like a deep breath to tell this story. All right, so we are just gonna start right off from the beginning, and I'm just gonna tell every detail through to the very end. This is like so weird to talk about this on camera because I've always only talked about this one-on-one with people, and I have spoken about it like on Facebook when it originally happened, but I think it's because for those of you that don't know, I just experienced one 2 months ago, very similar to my first one, so it's like fresh but not fresh kind of thing. It's one of those, this specific story was a long time ago. So my first miscarriage that I ever experienced was in 2015 in September. I found out I was pregnant when my daughter, right before my daughter's first birthday, and we were so excited. We went and took photos to announce the pregnancy. I always had a little fear when I was pregnant. Even with my daughter, I was considered a high-risk pregnancy with my daughter, but we didn't know I was high risk until after the fact because I did have gestational diabetes and it went untreated because they didn't test for it until way later in the pregnancy when they found out that I was going to need insulin, and she ended up coming 3 weeks early because of not being treated. But thankfully she came out perfect. There was nothing wrong. Everything was wrong with me. I had a horrible delivery. I hemorrhaged. It wasn't good. So when I got pregnant this time with this specific baby, I was super nervous because I already knew going into it that it was going to be higher risk than the last one. Every pregnancy just scares me. I'm excited, but at the same time, they scare me. But at this point, I was pregnant. I had a successful pregnancy. I wasn't even worried about like losing a baby. I thought my pregnancy was going to be difficult, but not to the point where my baby was going to not make it. I went on throughout my day. Doctor didn't think anything was wrong. And then I started feeling like really just in the pit of my stomach, I felt like there was something wrong. So I kept bringing it up to her and she kept telling me, no, you're fine. Everything's great. Go back to work. And if you don't know, I'm a hairstylist. So at the time I was working at a place that was not ventilated very well. I was working with a lot of chemicals and my doctor knew this, and it was just something, not saying that this is the cause, but there's so many factors that go into a pregnancy, specifically when you already have health issues in the pregnancy. So I just kept being naive. I just kept saying, okay. And it's like frustrating because when I look back, there's nothing you can do about it, but it's frustrating that I wasn't pushier at the time because I don't like confrontation. And sometimes when a doctor is very pushy on me, I'm like, okay. And I'm not like that now, but it took this experience to make me the way I am now. So if you are someone that you are having fears of something, 100% trust your instinct. You are the mother that is your child. Get a second opinion if you need one, but keep looking for a doctor until you're comfortable, honestly, because I just was never 100%, I never connected with this doctor. And she told me everything's fine. I go in for my 13-week ultrasound. There's the baby, great heartbeat. It's moving all over the place. I'm so excited, and I'm like, I'm planning the gender reveal. I went and planned it. I booked the appointment to have it done, and then I had planned the party. the same day. So I planned to go in at like 10 a.m. for the gender reveal, and then my party was supposed to be later that day. So fast forward, it is now, I'm 16 weeks pregnant, and it's a few days before my gender reveal party. And I went to bed one night, and I was never really a spiritual person until this happened to me. I went to sleep, and in my dream, it was the most vivid dream, and I feel weird. I feel like I'm gonna get emotional talking about it. The dream was so vivid and so intense, but I went to sleep and I was really pregnant in my dream, and my stomach was translucent, so I could see my baby in my stomach, and it was glowing, like basically like an orb of light in my baby. So my baby was glowing inside my stomach, and I was in my great-grandmother's house. And it's so weird because my great-grandmother passed away when I was 16. And at this stage in my life, I'm 25. No, I was 26. So it's been 10 years since my great-grandmother had passed, and I had never had dreams about her before. And I was in her house, which I had not been in 10 years. And I see my great-grandfather, who passed away when I was a child. I was like 3 when he passed away. And he was standing over by the kitchen counter, and I walk around to their front door, and I see my great-grandmother, who we called Nan. And Nan was translucent, and she looked like she did when she was in her 40s. So she passed away well into her late 80s, but in my dream she was in her 40s. And it looked just like her in her 40s. And she walks up to me kind of aggressively in my dream. And she's like smiling, like she's aggressive in like the sense like, let me hold your baby kind of thing. And I was standing there like, no, because the baby's inside me. I'm like, you can't take my baby. She reaches in smiling, and she scoops my baby, and in her hands is the light in her hands. And she takes it and she cradles it, and she's smiling and just cradling it. And she like rubs her hand on my shoulder. And I'm smiling that she's holding my baby. But then all of a sudden, I got this like sadness over me in my dream. I'm literally like so sad that she just took the orb, because when I looked down at my stomach, my baby was still in my stomach, but the light was not in my baby. My baby was not glowing anymore. My Nan had my glowing light. Like it was almost like she took the soul from my baby and was holding it. And I woke up, and I was bleeding. And it was one of those things, like my dream told me before I had even woken up, that baby was gone. There was no way that it was just a fluke of just spotting. It was impossible. In my mind, it was impossible. And it was on a Sunday. I went into the bathroom, and I'm like panicking. My heart had dropped into my stomach. It was like I wanted to throw up, and I didn't know what to do. So I went and told my husband. I was like, there's something wrong. He was like, call the doctor. So I called the doctor, and my doctor tells me, that's normal. You're fine. Go ahead and relax. You have an appointment on Tuesday. Mind you, it's Sunday. She's like, you have an appointment on Tuesday. We can bring you in on Tuesday and we'll check. And I said, okay. So I hang up the phone and I sat down. I said, it is not okay. And I told my husband, I want to go to the emergency room. And he goes, are you sure? And he goes, well, why don't you call another on-call doctor? So I did. I call a different doctor, and a different doctor says, if it keeps up, come in. So it never got worse. My bleeding never got heavier. It just maintained it. But I just knew. In my gut, I knew. And my husband was telling me, you're fine. You're overreacting. Everything's fine. You stress out too much. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. And I hadn't told him about my dream yet. And I'm like, you just don't understand. So later that night, I told him, I was like, I need to go in tomorrow. So I went in the next day. Mind you, my gender reveal is on Wednesday. It is now Monday, and I just had all of Sunday already knowing what I was kind of in for. I go into the doctor's, and they put the ultrasound on my stomach, and I can clearly see that there is a baby on that screen that is not moving. And she was pushing and pushing with the ultrasound, which was making the baby swish around, which, not to get so detailed, but what made it gross to me is I could feel the baby moving, because at this point, I'm now 16 weeks pregnant. I was feeling those flutterings and the movement in my stomach. So when she moved the baby, I could feel it. And that's what made me just, like I was just disgusted with myself. I hadn't cried yet because it was like I was in disbelief that it was happening. I just wanted the doctor to tell me that I was wrong, basically. So it wasn't a doctor, it was a nurse that had checked. So by law in this hospital, she is not allowed to tell me that my baby has no heartbeat. She needs the doctor to inform me. So she leaves the room, she leaves me in there. She doesn't come back for a while, and she had told me to get dressed, so I got dressed and I'm sitting there. A different nurse comes in and says, is there someone you can be with today? And I said, no, I'm by myself and my husband's at work. And she goes, you're going to need to call to have him come home if you can. She goes, you really shouldn't be alone today. And I said, why? And I already know why, but I was getting pissed that no one was saying it to me. And she goes, well, we need you to go into a further ultrasound at the hospital. So at this point I was at the doctor's office, but she's telling me I need to go to the hospital. I felt like I ran into a wall. Like I just crashed a car or something. It was like, I can't even explain it. It was, and I know those of you out there that have experience, I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's just like how could my body fail me? I was disgusted. I was embarrassed. I was like, I can't even, it was just so many things. How am I going to tell people? I'm ashamed. Like those are feelings that I legit had. I just felt so ugh. And I was trying not to cry because I knew I had to walk out of that doctor's appointment. And I didn't want people to look at me because I didn't want to be looked at as the girl who just lost her baby. It's just such a weird, it was weird that I was actually fearing having to tell people and me being embarrassed. It's so sad because now if I was going through that, I would hug myself. Like if I saw someone going through that, I would give them a hug. But it was, I know that if you've experienced it, you will understand. I then leave, I go home, I texted my husband, I said, you need to come home. My husband knew right when I texted that he had to leave. He came home, he was already in tears when he showed up at the front door. He wasn't like bawling yet, but he was like choked up and his eyes were kind of trickling just a tiny bit because he was like, he knew something was wrong. And obviously I'd been telling him there was something wrong before I'd gone in. And I said, our baby has no heartbeat. And I just lost it. And he was crying. I was crying. Like, it just reminded me, I was crying so hard. It was like taking like candy from a little kid and them just having a full on tantrum. I was hyperventilating. I couldn't breathe. And I was petrified to have to see anybody because, mind you, this baby is still in my stomach and I still have to go out and do stuff and go to the doctors, and I didn't want to see anybody. So we get in the car, we drive to the hospital, we get in, and they do a very in-depth, very invasive ultrasound, and this is just to confirm the death. So they're checking me. This ultrasound tech also cannot say anything to me, and mind you, at this point the hospital, no one has actually like said you've lost the baby to me. And I was getting frustrated because I can clearly see that this baby is not moving. And my husband was so hopeful at that second, technically it was his first ultrasound, but it was my second for the day. And he was so hopeful that I was wrong. And I just kept telling him I'm not wrong. Like he didn't really know what to look for on the screen. So she checks, there's no movement. She then leaves. Mind you, now I went in at 7 a.m. when the doctors opened, and it is now almost 8 o'clock at night. So they had me go all day in the middle of the day without telling me anything or like how I'm gonna go about removing the baby. And when you are past a certain point in your pregnancy, the baby is too large for you to push out naturally at home, so they want you to be into the hospital. There are different phases in miscarriages where if it happens early on, some doctors will just send you off and just tell you to go home. And there are phases in the pregnancy where if you have a miscarriage, they 100% want you to be at the hospital, because it's just even crazy to me that they expect you to flush flush the fetus down the toilet. That's typically, or they'll tell people to throw it away, and oh my God, I can't even fathom that. But I knew that was not gonna happen to me because I was like, my ass is gonna be at the hospital when this goes down because I'll be ruined. So we leave the ultrasound room and we go back to the doctor's office because my OB is finally there. So we're sitting there and she tells me, I'm sorry, but there was no heartbeat. She goes, I said, I can't go to work like this because I was still working. I wasn't off work. And I said, I can't go to work like this. And she goes, well, I'll give you a couple of days off and then we'll see where to go from there. I said, how are we gonna get the baby out of my stomach? And she goes, well, let's see what your body does. But if you need to take a week off of work, I can let you take a week off of work. So my doctor expected me to go back to work before the baby was removed from my stomach. And I was like, hell no. There is no way I'm going to work, excuse me for saying this, with a dead baby in my stomach. And the fact that I am showing and my clients know that I am pregnant, there is no way I would possibly be able to make it through a normal day. So I told my husband I'm not going back to work until I feel ready to go back to work, and he 100% supported me. He was with me the whole time through the entire day. He was even with me the entire next day. And I was so angry with my doctor that she just, because I'm sure she sees this a lot. She was surprised that it was so far along in the pregnancy, but she said sometimes this happens, it's a fluke. Those were her words. And I said, okay. And I go home, cry and cry and cry. And I had to post to Facebook because I had a gender reveal party that I had planned. And I planned this party and I had to tell them that it's canceled. So I canceled it. And of course, all these floods of just, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry comments happened. And which I appreciate, and I 100% loved the support I was getting. But it was one of those things that obviously you're just gonna have to grieve in your own time and deal with it in your own time. So I went it was on the 4th day that I had the baby, but I went 3 days before my body went into labor. I go into the hospital. They check me in immediately because they already knew they were already expecting me, and they already knew how far along I was, and they were all ready to give me the meds and stuff. So what they do is they put me on the bed. They pumped me full of Pitocin and basically to put my body into labor. They broke my water. I kept telling the nurse that I felt like I needed to push, and she's like, there's no way you need to push. You just got here. And I said, no, like I need to push. And she goes, no, you don't. She goes, you need to pee. And I said, okay. So she gets me up. And at this point, I'm not crying. I'm just like, let's get this done because I'm going to lose my mind. So I go into the bathroom. And I sit down and she gives me a bucket, like this little like pee bucket that connects to the toilet. There's ones that they do when you do like urine test, but this one was like a bucket and it was kind of like off of the toilet. And she goes, if any of your blood or anything that comes out of you, it needs to go into the bucket so later on they can do tests on it. And I'm sitting there. She told me not to lock the door, but I'm a very private person. I don't know why the hell I locked the door because I got stuck in there because of this. So I lock the door, I go over, I sit down on the toilet, and I go to pee, and I felt like I had to push. So I pushed, and I looked down, and there is my baby, my fetus, and I'm staring at it, and I literally went into full shock. I still cannot, like looking back, because it's like imprinted in my brain. I could not believe what I was looking at. I grab it and I placed it in the bucket. And not that you want to look it up, but it's a baby. If you look up what a 16-week fetus looks like, you will know exactly what I just looked at. And I had to place it in the bloody bucket that they gave me because there's blood everywhere at this point. And it's because I stood up to place it into the bucket, and I was just so like, I thought I was gonna pass out. I remember being able to unlock the door and I fell, and she picks me up, she scoops me up, she goes, what happened? And I couldn't talk, and then she looked at the bucket, she saw what was in the bucket, she grabbed me, and another nurse, it was a man, he came and dragged me over to my bed. They pumped me full of medicine immediately, and I was just bawling, and I was looking at my husband because I was trying to tell him what I just saw, and I immediately passed out. So I don't know what they put in it, but they knocked my ass out. And I fell asleep. I woke up the next day, I think it was around like 7:30. And nothing was discussed. It was just, here's pain medication and you need to take care of yourself kind of thing. If you have any problems, come back. So I went home with my husband and I just sat and cried. And I kid you not, the only thing that got me through that is my husband and my daughter. Because it was hard to sit there and cry when I was so grateful to have my daughter. I'm gonna cry. I'm telling you, I can get through this stuff. It's just like when I start talking about it, I just like, I can remember everything that I felt. But I was so grateful for my husband and my daughter, and I just cried a lot. I mean, there's nothing else I can tell you except that I cried a lot over a period of time, and I talked about it a lot. I did tell a lot of people, and what makes this story to me like totally worth sharing is when I shared it with groups of people before. Obviously it was never like this public of speaking like on the internet, but with private conversations, I had so many people, so many women that wrote me privately and spoke to me privately about how me speaking out about it made them feel better, and it felt like they had something in common, because a lot of people don't talk about it because you do go through those feelings of shame and embarrassment and they don't want to talk about it. But it's one of those things, I truly believe everything happens for a reason, and it's hard to believe that in the moment. But after this specific incident that happened to me, it changed me for the rest of my life on how I think about things, how I feel about people, how I feel about, you know, children and pregnancies. Like it changes you. It 100% changes you. And each event, each pregnancy will change you, no matter whether it's successful or not successful. Everything is going to change you. And this one just opened my eyes. And I kid you not, I have never been more appreciative of things because of that pregnancy. And what is just so crazy to me, I had my miscarriage and I went into the hospital on September 22nd. I went in at 5 p.m. and I delivered that baby at, I think it was like 2 or 3 in the morning on September 23rd. My son, exactly 1 year later, I was in that exact hospital giving birth to my son on September 22nd. And I delivered my son on September 22nd. It was at 11:45 p.m. So it was so close to being September 23rd. And I remember thinking, I don't want to have him on the 23rd because I've already had a baby on the 23rd. And I had him, and we stayed at the hospital the whole next day on the 23rd. And then we left. So the same 2 days, a year previously, I experienced one of the worst experiences I've ever had in my life. And then exactly 1 year later, I experienced one of the best experiences, which is my rainbow baby. And if you don't know what a rainbow baby is, it's a baby born after a miscarriage or a stillborn or anything that's neonatal, the death of a child during pregnancy. A baby born after that is considered a rainbow baby. And it was just the craziest thing. Like it was so crazy. I remember being so happy and just like I'm like, how in the freaking world? He was born early and it just happened to be on those 2 days. And I just think that is so crazy to me. And what a cool ending to such a sad story. But I think that was one of the coolest things, and I freaking love my son to death, and he was born healthy and it was a successful pregnancy, and that is just incredible to me. All right, you guys, that is my personal story on my miscarriage. The first one I have. I will be doing a second video on miscarriage, which will be the one I just experienced 2 months ago. And I'm going to keep sharing stories like these because I think it's extremely important that we talk about things like this, because there are so many women out there that experience these that they just don't talk about or don't have anybody to talk to about it, and they don't want to talk about their family. And it's easy to talk to a stranger on the internet that does videos. That's just how life is. So if there are any of you that are experiencing this right now or just need someone to talk to about it, I am right here. You can also find me on Instagram. You can follow me there. You can private message me there if you'd like, but I'm here. I am completely comfortable talking about this, and I am completely comfortable answering questions you may have. And that I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.